What's up everybody, welcome back. In today's video we're going to start working on the drag and drop system for our inventory. So the project you see here is a little bit further down the line and it has a bit more features already in here, so we won't be able to do everything in this video today. It's probably going to take 2, maybe even 3 videos to get to this point. But we're just going to have to see how it goes. So for today we're going to start setting up the dragging and dropping. So we will be able to drag items in between the different slots and in between the inventory, and we can manually stack items as well. Later we're going to work on splitting stacks and things like that. And you can see inventories have different sizes now, so you can define the size of the inventory, and this big container also has more inventory room than the small container, for example. So those are all kinds of things we're going to be working on. And today we're going to start setting up the dragging and dropping. So if you like the series, please consider leaving a like. And if you want to get your hands on the project files, you can leave a small donation on my Ko-fi page, or you can become a YouTube member, and then you will get access to the premium channels in the Discord, and those will give you access to a few premium downloads, and this project file is one of them. So with that stuff out of the way, let's just start today's video. So to start the drag and drop system, first of all we need to create a drag and drop operation. So let's go to the widgets folder, right click and create a new blueprint class. Look for drag and drop, or drag drop actually, and you want to create the drag drop operation. I'm going to call this drag drop inventory. And let's open it up. So we're simply going to add 3 variables in here. The first one is the item row name. And we want to make sure that we set it to instance editable and exposed on spawn. So it's a name variable and then instance editable exposed on spawn. And we're going to duplicate this one, and that's the item amount. So that's an integer, and again we want it instance editable and exposed on spawn. And the last one we need is the isWorldItem boolean. So isWorldItem, that's a boolean. And again we need to enable the instance editable and exposed on spawn flags over here. So compile and save, and the drag and drop inventory is good to go. Now let's open up our inventory slot, because this is the widget that we actually want to drag around. So we're going to go to the graph in the inventory slot, and first we want to override a function, and the function that we want to override is the on mouse button down. So let's select this one. Let's make a little bit of room in here, and first of all we're going to drag off the mouse event, and we're going to check if we press the left or the right button. So is mouse button down. And over here we want to check the left mouse button. So we can plug this into a branch. And if this is actually the left mouse button, then we want to detect drag. So we're gonna drag off the mouse event again over here. And we look for detect drag if pressed. Plug this into the true pin. And then over here we're gonna select the left mouse button again. And now we can simply plug this into the return node and pass on the return value. So if we press the left mouse button on this widget, it will detect drag. So that's what this function does. Then we want to go into the event graph, and over here we're going to create a new custom event. So let's right click, custom event, and I'm going to call this remove dragged items. So remove dragged items. And over here, first we're going to grab ourselves a branch, and we're going to check if this is a world item or not. So if it's a world item, it's on the right inventory. If it's not, it's a player item, so it's on the left side. And then we can simply move it around. So we're going to grab our player inventory widget, and from here we can get our character, so the third person character. And if it's a world item and we dragged it around, we want to remove it from a container. So we're going to call our server remove item from container. And then plug this into the true pin. For the contents, we're going to make an array. And then we're going to make the inventory structure. And we can simply plug in our item row name and the item amount. And the other way around, it means it's removed from the player inventory. So then we want to drag off the third person character and we want to remove an item from inventory. So server remove item from inventory. Make sure you call the server one. Plug this into the false bin. So we're not going to drop it into the world, leave that false, and then we can simply plug in the array over here to pass on the item contents. So let me see, with this function in place, we want to create a new function, but we're going to override it again. So look for override, and this time we want to override on drag detected. So that's over here, on drag detected. And let me grab my notes. So over here, first we're going to call our remove dragged items event. So let's drag off here, remove dragged items. So this will make sure as soon as we start dragging the item, they will be removed from the container or the player's inventory, depending on where it's from. Then I'm going to grab the border for the background, and I actually want to make it transparent. So while dragging there is no border, I just think it looks a little bit better. So I'm going to set the brush color and then simply make a linear color and leave it all zeros. That's fine. After that, we want to create a drag and drop operation. So right click and create a drag and drop operation. Plug it in over here. So for the class, you want to select your drag and drop inventory that we just created, and that will give us the exposed on spawn variables that we added in here. So for the item row name, we can simply grab it from the variables, just like the item amount and our isWorld item boolean. So we have those three set up and good to go. Then for the default drag visual, we're simply going to drag off here and type reference to ourselves. So we're going to drag this widget around. And that should actually be all we need to set here. So then we can plug the return value into the return node. And this function should be good to go. So we can compile and save it as well. And now we want to make a few changes to our inventory grids. So let's minimize this for now and let's open up our inventory grid. And in here we only want to add a few variables. So let me go to the graph over here, and we're gonna add the isWorld inventory boolean. So let's add one, isWorld inventory. So that's a boolean, and we also want to get a reference to our player inventory widget. So we're gonna call this widget blueprint player inventory, and then turn it into the player inventory widget. And let's see, we do not need to set these exposed on spawn, so we're good to go over here. We're going to compile and save the inventory grid. And then we're going to go inside of the player inventory to make some changes in there. So let's grab the player inventory widget and go to the graph in here. And I'm going to do the same thing in my notes quickly. Okay, so over here we need to make a change to the event graph for event construct. So let's look for our event construct. That's destruct, this is construct. And we're going to grab the grid inventory widgets. So we actually added the inventory grid widgets where we just added the variables to over here. And we're going to make sure that we can simply check a boolean to test if it's the player inventory or the world inventory. So we're going to grab our grid inventory world, drag it in here, and we simply want to set the isWorld inventory boolean. So this is the world inventory, so we're going to set this one to true. And then we also want to pass on the player inventory reference. So we're going to set our widget blueprint player inventory, and that's a reference to ourself. So plug that in over here. And for the grid inventory player, we're going to drag it in as well, and for this one we only want to set the player inventory reference. So set player inventory, and then again that's a reference to ourselves, and plug it in over here. So on construct we're setting these variables on the grid widgets. And then we want to create a function that we're going to call if an item gets dropped somewhere inside of our inventory. So let's create a new function, and I'm going to call this item dropped. Okay, that's nice. There we go. And we're going to give this a bunch of inputs. So let's tackle those first. Let's create a new input, and the first one is dropped in world inventory. And the second one is also a boolean, and that's called dropped in player inventory. No, oh really? Okay, then we're going to add the item row name and the item amount. Oh, that was a local variable. I'm really messing things up now. So input, create a new one, item row name. That's a name variable. And then also create the item amount. And that's an integer. And then we need one more boolean, and that's called was world item. So was world item, and turn it into a boolean. And we need a local variable, and we're simply going to create an array of our inventory contents. So create a new local variable, and that's the local dropped items. And that's of the type inventory contents. That's our structure, and turn it into an array. So first we're simply going to grab in a setter for the local inventory, or the local dropped items, sorry, and we're going to make an array, and then we're going to make an inventory structure from here. So we can plug in the item row name and the item amount, and those are stored and good to go. Then we want to grab a branch over here, and first of all we want to check if we dropped it on top of the world inventory. So let's plug in that boolean, and I'm simply going to add a print to make things a little bit clearer as well. So I'm going to say dropped on world inventory for the true pin, and then we simply want to drag in our third person character, and if this is true we're going to add an item to the container because it's dropped on a container inventory. So we're going to call server add item to container, connect it up over here, and then we're going to plug in the local dropped items for the contents. And then if this branch over here is false, then it's dropped on top of the player inventory, but we want to make sure that it actually is. So we're going to plug this false branch, the false pin into a new branch, and then plug this condition into the player inventory. So if this one is true, it's dropped on the player inventory. So I'm going to add a string here again and change it. And then we want to drag off the third person character, and this time we want to add the item to the inventory of the player. So server add item to inventory. Plug it in over here. We're going to plug in our dropped item local variable, and we do not want to plug in a pickup because it's not coming from a pickup. We already removed it as soon as we started dragging the item, so we do not have to deal with removing it. We only need to add it if we drop it. So that's done over here. So we can go back to the branch over here and add another branch. So if this one is false, it's not dropped on the player inventory and not dropped on the world inventory. So then we dropped it somewhere outside of those widgets. So in that case, we're going to say something like dropped into world, for example. So I'm going to plug this one into the true pin, and I'm going to say dropped into world. And then to make sure that everything matches up, I'm simply going to drag off the dropped into world, and I'm going to get a not boolean, and I'm going to copy and paste it and plug it into the player inventory, and then grab an end node. So technically this should be true, but I'm just going to check for it anyway and plug it into the condition over here. And then right now we do not have anything to actually throw an item back into the world yet. We are doing that with the F key, but that's not really working in this way. So if this happens right now, we're simply going to put it back where it came from. So then we can grab a branch over here. And we want to plug in the was world item boolean. So if it came from the world inventory, we're also going to put it back in a container. So then we're going to go to the true pin over here, server add item to container. And if it came from the player inventory, we're going to put it back inside the player inventory. So this is just temporary to make sure that the items do not get lost if you drag them outside of a widget. So later on, we're going to make sure this changes and throws item into the world. Okay, so with that in place, we want to create the actual onDrop function. So we can override a function again, and this time we want to look for onDrop. And then over here, it's not too hard. So we want to make a little bit of room. We're going to drag off the operation and we want to cast it to our drag and drop inventory operation. And with that, we can get the variables from there. So we can get the item row name. And then also grab the item amount. And we want to get the isWorld item boolean as well. And then we want to call our item dropped function that we just created. Plug it in over here. And then let me see, so it's not dropped in the world inventory and it's not dropped in the player inventory. So the onDrop will register if you drop it on top of this widget. And right now we are in the player inventory. So if this widget registers an onDrop, it's not inside of the world inventory and it's also not inside of the player inventory. So we can simply leave those two to false. We can plug in the item row name, the amount and the world item, and that's good to go. Then we want to plug this in here and make sure that we set the return value to true. So that will make sure that the drag and drop operation is handled and it will not return in another widget below it. So set this one to true. And that tackles dropping item inside of our player inventory. And now we also want to go to the inventory grid widget. And we want to make sure that we add an onDrop event in here as well. So if we drop an item onto the inventory grid, this will determine what happens then. So I'm going to switch my node quickly. So again, we want to override the onDrop function. So function override onDrop. And we want to cast the operation to our drag drop inventory. So from here we can get our variables again. So let's do that first. Get item row name, get item amount, and get isWorld item. Oh, really? There we go. And then we have the player inventory widget as a reference here. So we're going to drag it in. And we can call our item dropped function. So item dropped, plug it in over here. So these variables, we can simply pass them on. Item row name, item amount, isWorld item. And then for these two, we're going to drag in the isWorld inventory and plug that one directly into the dropped into world inventory. And for the other one, we're going to grab a not boolean. So we're simply going to flip it around and plug that one into the player inventory. And that should work. So then again, we want to plug it in and make sure for the return value we set it to true. So we took care of the drag and drop operation and it can be marked as handled. Okay, so that should be good as well. And I think for now we can do a small test. And as I mentioned before, it's not going to be perfect right now because we need to add other stuff as well. But the drag and dropping should sort of work. So if we open up our inventory, let's have a little look. So we can actually drag it around and for now it will auto align. So there's no slots, there's no inventory size yet. So all those stuff we need to work on. But for now we can still pick up items, and that's working. And let me see if we can transfer items. So I'm dragging them on top of here, and that's actually not working because the inventory grid is set to size to content. And for now there's only one inventory slot in this widget, so if we want to transfer them between our inventories, we actually need to drop them on top here, and then you will see they transfer. So I know this is not how it should be, but we do not want to spend a lot of time to make this work, and then in the next episode we're going to change it all. So for now we just have to deal with it. In the next episode we're going to add inventory slots, inventory sizes, make sure it doesn't auto sort, and then everything will come together. So this is the start of the dragging and dropping. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and that will be greatly appreciated. I'll be back soon for more. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later, guys. Bye bye.